YouTube, it's Peggy Lu Who. Welcome back to Peggy Lu Who Reads, or Peggy Lu Who Reads. I want to start off by thanking my 24 subscribers, including my mom. Hi, Mom. If you're not a subscriber yet, there's a middle-aged goth woman with glitter and sparkly eggplant lipstick in front of you who's going to talk to you about books for 15 to 20 minutes. What the hell are you waiting for? Push the button. No, it's down there. Just push the button. Click the button. It's down there. It's literally like right down there. Push the button. Push the button. Subscribe. Push the damn button. Do it. Push the subscribe button. It's down there. It's right down there. Thank you. Also, while you're down there, there's a like button. There's also a share button. You can share it with your friends. Cool. Side note, I checked with everyone today, and all of the goth girls that you went to high school with all have the Winnie the Pooh theme song stuck in their heads today. Just FYI. So this is going to be my May wrap-up video where I'm going to give brief reviews of the books that I finished in May. If you've been watching this channel all along, you'll know that I put out the second video that I ever did was my May TBR. I listed the books that I was hoping to read in May. And a couple of days ago, I put out a video that it was my June TBR, which was all of the books that I was hoping to read in June. I recorded that actually before the end of May because I was going on a road trip. So spoiler alert, I actually finished some of the audiobooks that I was going to listen to / read while I was on my road trip in May. So those are going to be included in this video. So I'm going to do this in the order that I finished the books, starting earliest in May and going to the end. There's going to be a section at the very end of all of these books where I am going to list all of the audiobooks I listened to while I was on my road trip together. There are some books that I did not finish, and those are going to roll over into next month's wrap-up for June, and I'll go ahead and let you know what those were at the end. There's one book that I read before I even started my YouTube channel, so I didn't mention that in my May TBR, but I'm going to go ahead and give a review for it anyway. Oh, one other thing. I like to do this thing where instead of just doing 5 out of 5 stars or doing a rating out of stars, I like to do like a rating that is specific to the story. So if this was like Winnie the Pooh that I was reviewing, it would be 5 out of 5 honeypots or something like that. Instead of just 5 out of 5 stars, I just think that's a little fun. It's not the most original thing in the entire world, but I like it, so fuck it, we're doing it. I'm reading my notes off of the old iPhone, but trying to be spontaneous. I'm not going to read an entire script. What else do I need to let you know before we get started? I think that's it. Shall we dive right in? Why is my nose so itchy? Okay. So first off is the book that I did not mention in my May TBR that I had finished right before I started my YouTube channel. This is actually a book that a friend of mine asked me to read with her as like a book club, and we have not talked about it. So Alexis, if you're watching, here's what I thought about the book that you wanted us to read. The book is There There by Tommy Orange, and I gave it 3 out of 5 BART stations. So the novel There There is set in Oakland, California, which is where I'm from, where I live. And if you don't know, BART is our rapid transit system here in the Bay Area. It's Bay Area Rapid Transit. So I gave it 3 out of 5 BART stations because several scenes in the novel take place in BART stations. And so before I get into the bulk of my review, I just want to say, like, one of the things that I wished I had known before I started reading this book is that there is some content of heavy gun violence and some sexual violence. And so if you are troubled by those things or you try to avoid them, this may not be the novel for you. There centers around the intertwining plot lines of about 10 different characters. At the beginning of the novel, there is a list of the 10 characters with a brief description of who they are and what their backstory is. And then each chapter sort of rotates through different points of view of the different characters, and they all sort of are intertwined and slowly all throughout the novel converging on this one event at this one location at the end of the novel, which is a big powwow that is happening at the Oakland Coliseum. So what I liked about the book, I mean, it was easy reading, and so it wasn't super challenging to read. There wasn't a lot that really stood out as far as the language and the writing to me. I really liked that it was set in Oakland, and so it was sort of like similar to movies like Blind Spotting and Sorry to Bother You that are set in Oakland. It, you know, had kind of that like love story to Oakland sort of appeal to it, and that was pretty cool. And I really liked that each of the different characters they're all sort of part of the indigenous community, but they all have very different backgrounds and very different experiences within that community and how involved they are in it or not, which I appreciated. I think that is a lot, that is some nuance that is lost in a lot of narratives around indigenous peoples, is that they're not like a monolith. They don't all have one, you know, homogenous experience and homogenous culture. So I did sort of like that. The main thing that I didn't like about it was the number of characters and the fact that some of them weren't as developed as others. I think that the fact that the book starts out with this index or glossary of the different characters is sort of a dead giveaway to this. I don't think that the novel would have worked without that list, and I sort of wonder if that was something that the editor or publisher wanted to add to the novel to make it easier to follow along. I definitely had to refer back to it several times. And, you know, there's a sort of phrase that gets thrown around amongst writers, which is like kill your darlings, which is when you're writing something, you know, you write your first draft, and then when you go back to revise it, you sometimes have to kill your darlings being either characters or plot points or settings, etc., that after you've written the whole thing, it turns out it doesn't work. And so I sort of wonder if this is the published version, like how many characters were there in the original? So I think that I would read another book by this author. But for those reasons, that's why I didn't rate it higher and why it wasn't a full win for me. Also, like I said, the violence was really hard to get through. And I think that if the gun violence had come up earlier in the novel, I probably wouldn't have finished it. I would have DNF'd it. If you don't know, DNF is do not finish. So that was there. Next up, I've read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhouse. So this was the book that I had checked out from the library, and I, in my TBR video, said that I didn't realize before I started it that it was part of a series, and how I was trying to avoid series. If you've watched my other videos, you now know that I am completely failing at avoiding books that are part of series. So, yes, I absolutely loved this book and am totally roped into reading the series now. And for that reason, I gave it 5 out of 5 crows. It really delighted me, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. And actually, the next book in the series doesn't come out until next year. What I'm going to do is wait until all of the books in the series are out. So I believe it's a 3-part series. So I'll probably wait until all 3 parts are out and then go back and read Black Sun and then read the additional 2. So Black Sun centers around a story similar to There. It's got multiple characters that are all sort of have their own backstories and plots, and they're all converging on a single time and place, a single event. And there are 4 main characters. The main character is Xiala or Zia. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it. It's Xiala. I in my head was reading it as Xiala. And Xiala is a woman who is a captain of a boat, and she is hired by this wealthy merchant's son to take a passenger across the sea to the main temple city of this civilization at a time of year that it is dangerous to cross. And she has a background where she is of a sort of mysterious race of people known as the Teak. She is pansexual. She, at the beginning of the novel, has been put into jail because of lewd behavior because she has hooked up with a woman and been caught by the woman's husband. The other characters in the book include the passenger that Xiala is taking across the sea, the rebirth of the sun god, like you do. There is a priest to the sun god, and then there is a son of a clan that is the Crow clan, and they're all converging on the ritual center, this temple city, Tova, where there is going to be a celebration of the solstice and an eclipse. And I didn't really realize before I read the book that it's sort of based on pre-Columbian cultures, or pre-Columbian arrival South American cultures. So that's pretty cool. I don't know much about them actually. So again, I love sort of books that are set in history, historical fiction, although this is not specific historical fiction, but because it exposes me to that history and like makes me curious about what happened and makes me want to look into it more. Things I loved about this book: it's really well written. It's a page turner. It ends on a good cliffhanger that left me wanting more. It's well written, but there's nothing problematic or nothing in the writing itself that made it unenjoyable for me. I really liked how the plot moved along. I liked the amount of description. I like that they included a map in the book, because one thing about me is that I have trouble visualizing spatial relation just from reading about it described. So I need to look at a map, or I need to look at a visual representation. Sometimes if books have a lot of description of places and characters going from one place to another, or characters that are in one place that is distinct from where other characters are, and it doesn't include a map, sometimes I have to like physically sit down and draw myself a map. So I like that they included a map in this. I like that there's representation of different gender identities and different sexualities, and there weren't any weird romance issues that I felt were shoehorned in. All of the interactions between the characters and the relationships all seemed very natural and not forced. None of the action seemed forced. It all centered from good character development. Yeah, I mean, it's a great book. So that's how I feel about Black Sun. Again, I can't wait for the other two to come out, and I will probably binge read them all together. Next up, I finished Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge. I gave Libertie 3 out of 5 pink pansies. I really loved the language of Libertie. It was really well written. It was almost in sections kind of like Poe's poetry. It was beautiful. It was fluid. It was melodic. It really was poetic. And that made sense based on like the description of the book from the synopsis on the inside leaf, and what I knew about the book going into it, being the story of this young woman who goes against her mother's plan for her life to be a physician because she is interested in following a career path in music, or she wants to be involved with music. It makes sense that this is a melodic, lyrical, poetic style of writing. It goes well with that. I do feel like the synopsis is a bit of a bait and switch, though, because the character does not really pursue a path in music. She actually just wants to hang out with her friends who are musicians. So, and then ends up doing something completely different that has nothing to do with either being a physician or music. And so I felt like that was a little bit of a misnomer on the part of whoever wrote the synopsis for the book. I enjoyed the book, the first half better than the second half, and so my issues with the book were that I didn't really feel like the characterization of Libertie was fleshed out in a way that made the decisions that she made make sense. It just sort of seemed like, I'm going to make an assumption, or the way it read to me was that the author had a plot that they wanted to follow, and she didn't necessarily develop the character to make it make sense that the character made the decisions that led to those points in the plot. Like, I'm trying to do this without actually giving a spoiler, but like, she makes decisions about not wanting to tell her mother something, and it ends up like throwing her life into a completely different direction that it just doesn't make sense to me that that's where she ended up, solely because of wanting to keep a secret from her mother. For those reasons, I didn't rate it very highly. Oh, also, like the love story, like, was not, it didn't seem authentic to me. Like, I didn't buy that she was really just this in love with this guy. So for that reason, I gave it 3 out of 5 pink pansies. Finally, I finished Jonathan Strange and Mr. Narelle by Susanna Clarke, and I gave that 5 out of 5 mirrors. So this book, oh my god, it's so charming, it's so delightful, I loved it so much. There is this device in the book where the author narrator, it's easy to assume that, like, because the narrator is the author of the novel and acknowledges that they're the author of the novel within the novel, to say that is Susanna Clarke, but this is obviously, like, the narrator could be another character that Susanna Clarke has created, who is the character of the narrator, who is also the author of the novel. But I love that device. And so the author narrator several times acknowledges that they are the author narrator, and like breaks from telling the story to speak directly to you as the reader. It's almost like in movies and film, like such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where Ferris Bueller breaks the fourth wall and speaks directly into camera and speaks to the audience. And I love that. I thought it was very cute and very charming, but not in a completely twee and obnoxious way. And I loved the world building, the magic system. I loved that a lot of times when there is a fantasy novel or some novel that has either, or science fiction where there is a technology or magic, there will be the technology or the magic just automatically, instantaneously fixes problems or solves challenges for the characters. But I loved that the magic in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Narelle was not always perfect, and so the characters still had to work on how to use magic to achieve their goals, but may have to slightly adjust how they do that and what the goals are. And there was enough foreshadowing about what was going to happen later in the novel without too much. The parts of that were describing sort of the negative effects of enchantment and magic the description was so good that it was beautifully haunting, I would say. and the description of like the way that people experienced magic happening around them was just a really great sensory description that really brought me into the story. I can't say enough good things about this novel. I love it to death. I will read it again, even though it is 850 pages long. I'm not going to do it anytime soon, but I love this novel. I loaned it to my mom, and I can't wait for her to read it. I gave it to her, and it's full of like sticky tabs, and I told her, please don't take out the sticky tabs, because I put sticky tabs for things that I loved, particularly about the novel, and I put sticky tabs in for like things that came up that were sort of foreshadowing. I thought it would come up later in the book, and I wanted to be able to refer back to, and I put sticky tabs also in for like historical references that I wanted to look up later and learn more about the Napoleonic Wars and the Regency period, because it does go through the Napoleonic Wars and then later. So that would be, again, I mentioned this in the TBR video, but that would be the era of Jane Austen, Mr. Darcy, and Bridgerton and whatnot. So those are the books that I read, either in an ebook or a physical copy of a book. Then there were 3 books that I listened to the audiobook, which I still count as being read, while I was on my road trip to go see my mom. So the first one that I finished was The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is a book about a gentleman who is enslaved and who escapes enslavement and becomes part of the Underground Railroad. And it is a fantasy novel that he has some magical abilities. And so the novel is about how he comes to realize that he has these magical abilities, and how the folks at the Underground Railroad want him to participate in the Underground Railroad and use his magical abilities to help out. I liked the language. It's very good language. It was very good to listen to being read. And it was, again, descriptive enough, but not, not bogged down in the description. The magic system was great. The magic didn't completely just instantly solve the problem, which is my pet peeve. The love stories made sense. The characterization was good. The plot was good. There are historical references that I enjoyed, and so I gave this 4 out of 5 toy wooden horses, and I highly recommend this book. I may go back someday, if I get the opportunity, to go back and read the physical book and read the words. So that was The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. The next book that I listened to was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This book I gave 3 out of 5 broken thermometers. So this is a book or a novel that is set during the time of World War I, during the time of the Spanish flu in Dublin, and it is set in a ward that is set up specifically for pregnant women that are suffering from the flu. And the main character is a nurse, and it covers just a 48-hour, give or take, period of her time in that ward. Things I liked about it, for one thing, just like as an audiobook, it was set in Dublin, Ireland. The reader or the narrator for the audiobook did have an Irish accent, and that was nice because it wasn't a distraction that this person that was reading the thoughts of this Irish woman didn't have the Irish accent. That would have distracted me. It had the writing was well paced. It went along, it was a page turner, which is weird to say when you're listening to it in audiobook. There was, just enough description of the different characters in the space. And, so my reasons for not really rating it higher, at a certain point, it was just like, how many different, I get that there was a lot of people coming and going out of the hospital and a lot of people were dying of the flu, But it just was like, at a certain point, it's like, and here we have another woman who's been brought in and she's going to go into labor and either she's going to die or the baby's going to die or something bad's going to happen. And so it just sort of became like a pileup of, and then something shitty happened. And there were some moments that were kind of delightful. And one of the things was that there was the interaction between the main character, this nurse, and a volunteer who comes in. And I was enjoying that until they sort of shoehorned in this love story that I didn't feel was necessary. But it wasn't that big of a deal. I just sort of was like, okay. And yeah, so I mean, it was a perfectly good sort of vacation read type thing, and I enjoyed listening to it while I was on my road trip. And that's all I have to say about it. And finally, the last book that I listened to on audiobook while I was on my road trip was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, and I gave that 3 out of 5 Pulitzer Prizes. It did win the Pulitzer Prize for 2020. Yeah, it won the Pulitzer for 2020. Good for it. It was perfectly fine. There was nothing that stood out about it that I disliked. I didn't really love it. It is the story of a pair of boys who end up in a reform school in Florida. It's based on a true story of this reform school. It made me curious to want to look up, and I haven't done it yet, but like it made me curious to want to look up the reform school that it's based on and find out more about it and find out how much of the abuses were pulled from that true story that were described in the book. I don't know. It was the type of book that I, listened to it, I read it by listening to it, and it was all right. And that's about all I had to say about it. I don't know. It just didn't really leave a very big impression on me, like some of the other books that I read this month. So those are all the books that I finished in the month of May. So if you're keeping track, there are 2 books that were on my TBR for May that I haven't finished, which was My Own Words by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and my stretch goal book, which was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. So those 2 books are being rolled over into June with the other books that I have read. Post a comment if you have any questions or thoughts about my reviews, or if you have a different opinion about any of the books that I read. Also would love any suggestions. If you would like to see me review a book, I might have ordered a book that somebody mentioned previously. TBD. Also, I just want to remind you all that there are links in the description to my Instagram account and also my Book of the Month referral link. This is not a sponsored video. Book of the Month is not sponsoring me. I wish. And so, but if you've been thinking about trying Book of the Month and you want to give it a shot, please use my link. It will give you a discount on your first order, and it'll also give me bonus points that I can use to get free books later. Please like, share, subscribe, dislike if you have to, share. Did I say share? Maybe share this on your social medias. Thank you very much for your time, and until next time, read well. Hey, I just want to point out that my lipstick isn't smudged this time. Hit record. And eggplant sparkly make. The synopsis. Or Peggy Lu, who I'm going to do that again. And cool. And so I don't know why I just did C, like this is Sesame Street, but there you go. Ooh. Sparkles. Glitter. 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 Fuck, I'm just gonna start over. Like, I'm so fucking up this right now. I don't know why.